So the Bombers have defeated the Sydney Swans 11-5-71 to 8-15-63. It was a thriller, as so many Essendon Sydney matches are. I think we all had a heart attack watching that one, so there's a fair bit to talk about in this video. So grab a drink, grab a snack, you might need something a bit stronger than a beer. You might need a whiskey or something. I don't know what you drink, but sit back and we're going to talk about the game right now. So we really saw the best of Essendon and what Essendon can be at their best and what we, can be at our worst, or some of our weaknesses on display today in this game. 39-point lead at half time. We couldn't do a thing wrong. It was a little bit deceptive given that we'd only hit one behind up until that point, and, we'd been very, very efficient. But we did show once again, and I've brought this up in other videos, that our heavy possession style game plan can come unstuck and has come unstuck at various times when pressure is applied. We do tend to overpossess the ball, and that can lead to, turnovers, and it can coming unstuck under pressure. So I'm still not convinced that we're playing in a way that can be sustainable in finals. That would probably be my takeout from at least the eye test from just watching the game, what it felt like. I do think that we need to be a little bit more direct at times. There is nothing wrong with playing a possession game, but boy, oh boy, did we play a possession game in this one. We're going to get into some of the key stats. Quarter time, some of the signs were there. We led 3-1-19 to 1-1-7. So Caddy kicked the first 2 goals of the game. Played maybe you could argue his best game for the club. He hasn't had a what you call a breakout game yet. He hasn't had that game where he's had, he's sort of taken the bull by the horns and he's just won the game off his own boot or anything. But look, he's kicked 3 goals in this match, and that's the most goals he's kicked in a game in his short career. And the 2 games prior to this, he had 5 scoring shots, 2 goals 3 and 2 goals 3 in the 2 games before this one. So he does seem to be getting better and better. Saad El Houli kicked his first goal of his career to give us a 3-0 lead, and Hayden McLean got a goal after that to bring it back to the 3-1. But you could just see the way we were dominating possession in that first quarter. Martin had 13 possessions. Reid, and we'll get into Reid in a minute, had 12 possessions across half back. McGrath had 9 possessions. Robert had 9 possessions. El Houli 8. Even Caddy had 7. You're just playing a heavy possession game plan yet again with a lot of uncontested possessions, and that would get even more pronounced in the second quarter. In fact, in the second quarter, we kicked 6-1. Merritt got his first goal. Archer Day Wicks, the first gamer, a very, very neat little goal. If you have a look at it, he sort of balked and, twice, and then sort of got it onto his left foot, on his non-preferred foot. You don't see many first goals on someone's non-preferred foot, do you? And look, he had a little bit of a quiet game, as you would expect, but what a great moment for him to kick a goal with, I think it was his first kick. I was at the game, so I don't know. I didn't hear from the commentary if it was his first kick. Felt like his first kick. Perkins kicked another goal to give us a 6-1 lead, and then Merritt got another. And the Merritt situation was interesting because James Jordan is one of the best taggers in the competition, and I think Brad Scott definitely got one up on Dean Cox here, is that, and I'm pretty sure they had planned this, that if James Jordan was shutting down Merritt would go forward. And Merritt has had some success this year, and really that's what we need from Merritt. If Merritt is to become, I guess from an A+ or an A grader, which he really is, into an A+++, then he's got to keep hitting the scoreboard. And he has hit the scoreboard a number of times this year already. And to go forward when things are going, when he's struggling a little bit against a really tough tagger, and he kicked 2 goals in the second quarter, and the second one was a beauty there, where he just put it onto his left foot and he kicked it from about 40. It's so important. I mean, I reckon like 1 goal is probably worth about 8 possessions, right? That's probably how I would, in my unscientific world, that's probably how I would equate it. So that was great stuff by Merritt. Grundy got one back, and Kako and Durham ended up kicking some nice goals there to finish the quarter with a 6-1 quarter. But some of the numbers at half time were quite extraordinary, and I suppose if you do look at the numbers closely, and I'm a bit of a stats person, as you might have worked out by now, often you see things that are what I would call unsustainable. And that does concern me sometimes when you see things that are so far out of the box that you think, well, we can't continue like that. The opposition will shut down on that, and there'll be some sort of reversion to the mean. Like the top 7 possession winners on the ground at halftime are all Bombers. And McGrath on 22, Martin on 20, Reid on 20, for God's sake. Reid, I mean, all these players are on target for 40 or more if they kept this rate up. Redmond had 17, El Hooley had 15, Roberts had 15. It just goes on and on. And if you just look at some of the numbers, the uncontested possessions at half time, we had 82 more. We had 184 uncontested possessions to Sydney's 102. Contested possessions were about even, but we were just absolutely dominating or controlling the play. And I was actually thinking a bit at half time. I was sort of thinking to myself, Sydney will probably try to shut this down a little bit, not allow us to control the play as much as what we were doing. But as it was, we were controlling the play. We'd taken 3 marks inside 50. We'd had 19 clearances to 14. We'd had 5 tackles inside 50 to 0. I noticed someone did mention in the comments in one of my previous videos that they're annoyed that we always tend to lose the tackles inside 50 stat, and we do. I think we're the worst in the competition in that area, or second worst, or something like that anyway. But we had 5 inside 50s to 0 at half time. 5 tackles inside 50 to 0 at half time, and we had 27 inside 50s to 26. So I was obviously elated at half time. I'm sure all you guys were, 39 points up, but it was kind of an unusual game to have sort of 82 more uncontested possessions, and I thought Sydney are probably too good to not come back a little bit and to sort of eat into this lead, which is what happens. But at the end of the day, I was pretty confident that the lead was big enough that we'd be able to hold on. So that was the situation at half time, and things were looking pretty good. So shout out to Brad Scott for some bold selection. I think most of us were expecting that he wouldn't name 2 first gamers, and of course he did. But I think people were also expecting probably, maybe Archer Day Wicks or Sado Hooley would be the sub. But I think it was a bold move to make Dylan Shield the sub, the oldest player on the list. It was the first full game for Sado Hooley. There he wasn't the sub, and obviously the first game for Lewis Hayes and Archer Day Wicks. So it's kind of like 3 players were actually playing their first full game, if you like. So against an experienced team like the Swans, who are much more experienced than us, that was, I think, kind of unexpected from Brad. And, I'd like to see more of it. I am, as I've said before, a bit of a risk taker. I like to, maybe F around and see what happens. I think that's probably the best way to, learn in footy. So shout out to Brad there for that. So 3-quarter time, unfortunately, during the third quarter, it was unfortunate that first game of Lewis Hayes looks like he's done an ACL. I don't think it's been confirmed at this point, but Brad Scott after the game said it was near certain. So you wouldn't believe this, would you? I mean, talk about chalk and cheese in terms of highs and lows. You've got a first gamer who was playing pretty well. He'd got a bit of the ball, 16 possessions at that point, was getting a bit of the ball, looking solid as a rock down there, and then he suffers a serious knee injury on his first game. So just horrible for him. That's the third ACL and the 4th in a way if you count Draper, season-ending injury. That's the 4th season-ending injury we've got now. So what this means for the mid-season draft, whether they'll take 4 players, I think they'll probably still take 3. I don't think they'll take 4. I think they'll pass on one of those. But that's unfortunate for him, and it brings Jaden Laverde now into the equation as we move forward. But we'll get into that a bit later in the week as we make some other videos. But yeah, that was really unfortunate. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, would you? We just seem to be losing tall players this season with ACL injuries. So the third quarter, Sydney, not unexpectedly started to tighten up. And if you look at the second half in particular, I mean, the uncontested possessions at the end of the game, we had 90 more. We had 82 more at half time. So really, for the last half, it was essentially even in that stat. And that's what we were doing to control the game in the first quarter. And you've got to remember, that's padded out a little bit in that last 5 minutes of the game where we chipped it around and held possession a little bit longer. So, as I've said, this can expose us a little bit if the opposition can really lock down on us. And in that third quarter, Sydney started to get on top, but they also started to miss chances as well. Hayward kicked a goal. Redmond responded with a nice goal from 50 off one step. Beautiful goal by Redmond, to be able to kick that long off, such a short, well, not even a run-up, just off that one step. He's a beautiful kick of the football, isn't he? Campbell kicked a goal from Sydney. Caddy got it back for his third goal and what would prove to be Essendon's last goal of the match before Corey Warner got a late goal to make the margin 30 points at three-quarter time. And, I was feeling a little bit uneasy, I must admit, just because, as an Essendon supporter, you're never confident, are you? But I was just thinking it felt a bit like the North Melbourne game in some respects, that we just are not able to score easily. That's one thing that Essendon don't seem to be able to do, that the really good teams seem to be able to do, and that's just be able to score quickly and easily. For us, it's always hard. It always seems like it's really hard work. And I feel a lot of this is due to getting goals through... We get goals through structure, but not through chaos. I think of the great Richmond teams that won those premierships under Damien Hardwick, and they were sort of chaos teams that... their system was chaos. It's calling it chaos is not really accurate because that was their system. But creating goals through chaos in their forward line, and we tend to really rely on our system rather than just that. It's one of the reasons why I think we were hoping that Kako in the future be able to provide those sort of chaos goals for us down there, and the lack of forward pressure this year in our tackles inside 50 stats, which was a bit better today, admittedly, but has been down all year, is just one of those reasons why we, I think anyway, are struggling to put score on the board, because we're only really getting goals through, working hard through our system, kick, mark, game plan goals, I guess you would call them to some extent, rather than getting goals through chaos, which is an extremely important way to get them in the AFL. And it was kind of like, having your tooth pulled out watching that last quarter, because we just didn't look like we were going to be able to score. We were controlling parts of the game. Our effort was there. We were able, our intercept possessions and things like that. The back line was just working phenomenally and deserves all the credit for this win, the back line, as they probably did last week as well. The back line has just been absolutely A+. But we're just so inefficient when we get the ball forward in terms of we don't look like we're going to score. I think I'd like to see them sort of kick the ball, almost kick it to grass, kick it into space, have players run onto it, rather than sort of just kick it to a long target, ball comes out again. It's just so frustrating, and it sort of felt like it has the last couple of weeks where we haven't been able to score more than 60 or 70 points or anything like that. But in the end, we were able to hold on. Sydney did kick the last three, or the only three goals of the fourth quarter. Sheldrick, McInerney and Hayward. But one thing I was pleased about, and I guess it's a positive that we can take from some other games this year, is that we have been able to close out close wins and do it well. You can hold on in close wins and be lucky, or you can actually control the last few minutes and, really put your destiny in your own hands. And with Sydney bearing down on us, we were able to, I reckon, have 80% of the possession or so in that last 3 minutes. And there was a nice bit of play where Perkins was able to get the ball. He smartly went back and took his full 30 seconds. And then he kicked it to Dylan Shield deliberately so that Dylan Shield could go back and waste his 30 seconds. That's good clock management. And it was against North Melbourne as well. We had no right to win that game against North Melbourne at three-quarter time. And we were able to hold on through, a bit of guts and determination and controlling the last few minutes of a close game. And I thought we did that here. As much as we were outplayed in the last quarter, we were not outplayed in the last 3 minutes. And that's an important distinction to make. All right? We might have been outplayed in the first 90% of the quarter, but we controlled the last portion of the game and we closed out a nail-biting win. And in the end, we looked... it might not have looked comfortable with 5 minutes to go, but I thought they looked pretty comfortable closing the game out and making the right decisions. And I thought that was a real positive for the boys there. So just looking at the back line, because the back line was the key to this match. And what a great performance. Now, Mackay's been struggling lately. Mackay had 9 intercept possessions. He took a number of intercept marks. He still doesn't get a lot of the ball. He only had the 12 possessions, but 9 intercept possessions. Only one player, only McCartan from Sydney had more than that. Reid as well had 8 intercept possessions, McGrath 7, and Martin also had 7. And just the effort to close down space in the back line. I mean, Sydney didn't really look, whilst they did look a little bit more dangerous in the last quarter, they never really looked, like it was going to be comfortable for them to score. Our defence was absolutely fantastic. And every single bit of credit to this win goes to the defence, particularly the heroic performances of Zac Reid. And there's an important stat from Zac Reid which is showing that he's becoming an elite player. This was the 6th game in a row where his direct opponent has not scored a goal. The last opponent to score a goal on him was Darcy Fogarty in the game against Adelaide, and he has got through now 6 consecutive games without his direct opponent scoring a goal. He was intercept marking everything. He was, moving off his opponent once we got the ball to create space and be able to link out of the back line. He had the ball on a string there. 27 possessions, 14 marks, and really the performances of the back line really got us over the line in this one. So some of the key numbers out of the game. Essendon had, as you can see from the graphic there, nearly 100 more disposals out of the match. The Swans had 16 more inside 50s. Some people have pointed out correctly that this is kind of a plan by Brett Scott to have less inside 50s but be a bit more direct and efficient when we have them. It's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul, though, isn't it? We might be scoring a little bit more often per inside 50, but we're not getting many of them. At the end of the day, we're not really doing enough damage on the scoreboard. So we just got to get that balance right, I think. Stoppages. The Swans had 27 stoppage clearances to our 22, although we had double the centre clearances, 10-5. Clearances for the match was about the same. That's normally a strength of ours. Possessions, contested possessions, as you can see, 110 more to Essendon. That evened up massively over the course of the last half. The Swans actually had 22 more contested possessions, and we had 46% time in possession to the Swans' 37%, not surprisingly, with that much of the ball. We took 10 contested marks to 8. We had 126 marks to 92, not surprising when you got that much of the ball. We had 60 tackles to 46, which was good. There were some pretty red-hot holding the ball decisions in this match, I've got to say. And we had 7 tackles inside 50 to 6, which is an area of the game. That is the most we've had this year by a mile. And that is an area of the game that we needed to get better at. And it was good to see us get better with that today. So some of the players, well, who were the best players? I thought Zac Reid was our best player personally. 133 ranking points, 27 possessions, 14 marks, 8 intercept possessions. Fantastic game from him. Nick Martin was, if not as good, almost as good. He had 38 possessions, 145 ranking points. McGrath as well. Turned the ball over a couple of times, but I guess when you get the ball 35 times, that's going to happen, isn't it? He had 35 possessions, 11 marks, 146 ranking points. Setterfield had a sneaky good game. 8 tackles. Setterfield always leads us in tackles. So shout out to Setterfield. Not many people mention him or are aware of that. So let's have a shout out for Will Setterfield. 8 tackles to Will, 28 possessions. He had a sneaky good game. Pryor is getting better and better. He was very unsure of himself early in the season, I felt, and wasn't playing with confidence, and he's getting better and better. 23 possessions, 14 marks. I thought he was solid down there in the back line. Look, everyone in the back line played well. Redmond had 32 possessions, kicked a goal, and had more score involvements, or as many score involvements as any player on the field with 5. Caddy probably played his best game, kicked 3 goals, 1. That's the most goals he's kicked in a game, and in a low-scoring game as well, and was effective down there. Kicked his 3rd goal halfway through the 3rd quarter and was certainly our most productive forward. Goldstein is an absolute warhorse, 115 ranking points, 19 possessions, 29 hitouts. Thank God we kept him on the list this year, given the injury problems that we have. Archie Roberts, the coaching staff love this guy. I've heard some inside word about that. 27 possessions, 7 marks, really reliable player. Sam Durham, who looked like he got a bit of a knock in the last quarter. Hopefully he's okay. Had the 21 possessions, 8 tackles, equal with Setterfield, the most tackles in the match. And what a great mark he took in the third quarter? I think it might have been the third quarter. An absolute specky there. One of the marks of the year. Good on him for that. Sardo Huli kicked the first goal of his career, had the 21 possessions. Zach Merritt had the 19 possessions and was smartly used by Brad Scott. Was getting beaten, not surprisingly, when they really want to lock down on a player. James Jordan can do that. So they moved Merritt forward. And look, the fact that Merritt kicked 2 goals, to me, is kind of a win for Merritt. Right? If Merritt kicks 2 goals, he's not really meant to be a goal kicker. So if he kicks 2 goals, then he's won the day, as far as I'm concerned. Xavier Dersma made a couple of mistakes, but was pretty solid. 19 possessions, had the 4 tackles. Jai Caldwell looked a little off pace. Looked like he'd been missing for 4 or 5 weeks. And guess what? He had been missing for 4 or 5 weeks. Just looked like he was a step off it. And, I think this run will do him good. He'll be, bigger and better. And next week, one of my favourites, and probably, every chance to be the next captain. Had the 22 possessions. But yeah, just looked a little like he was about a step behind everybody else. Perkins had a typical Archie Perkins game. Flashed in and kicked the goal. 15 possessions. That's pretty much what Perkins does every week. Gets 14 or 15 possessions and flashes in for a goal. Peter Wright didn't hit the scoreboard, but like last week, I thought he was involved in some key chains of play. He still took 5 marks, and there were some important marks he took, and it's good to see him contributing without kicking goals. Lewis Hayes had the 16 possessions before his unfortunate injury and was looking really good. Hobbs is doing what he has done a lot of the year. Doesn't like kicking the ball, Hobbs. Only had the 5 kicks, but 10 handballs. Obviously, he's not a great kick. He's probably a weakness out of his game. And his spot would probably be in a little bit of jeopardy next week, I would imagine. Langford struggled a little bit down there. It just wasn't his type of game. It was really a game built more for Caddy, but he worked himself into it. Mackay had his best game for a long time. He's coming off back-to-back 3-possession games, Mackay. But when you have 9 intercept possessions, then that is a win as far as I'm concerned. 9, which is the most on the ground for an Essendon player. Kako didn't get much of the ball but kicked a goal. Shield just had the 5 possessions and was able to control the play, an important phase of play right at the end of the game, where he was able to eat up 30 seconds of the clock. And Archer Day, Wicks didn't contribute much but kicked a nice goal, which will be very, very memorable for him, and he gets a win in his first game. So, what do you guys think of the match? Is there anything I missed? What do you think of the game? Were you happy? Are you glass half full, glass half empty? It's interesting as well that there's a stat called expected score. An expected score shows you what the score should have been or would have been based on all the numbers in the match. An expected score had the Swans winning the match 72-52. We ended up winning by 8. So there was a 28-point swing in what the result was, an 8-point win to us, and what the result ought to have been, a 20-point win to the Swans. But you can interpret that however you want. Expected score is a bit of a could've, should've, would've stat, but it's more of a word of caution. That's all. It's more of a word of caution that if this match was played again and again and again and again and again, then the average score would be Sydney winning by 20 points based on all the things that happened in the game. But we got the last laugh. We needed a win over the Swans. They'd beaten us for a while. They won a few close ones against us. So what do you guys think? Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day, everybody. And as always, go Bombers!